Hello, good evening, and welcome. Hello to everybody. Thanks for being there. It's really great, as always, to see you chatting away in the chat. Been really looking forward to coming back and doing the second part, the watch party. So hope you're all doing well. I'm fine. How are you, Rupert?
I'm good. I'm good. It's been a busy day, actually, but
yes, it has. Yes, it
no.
has. I recognise quite a few names in the chat as usual. It's really great to see it, and so many folk, so many of our Patreon supporters here. And if you've never been with us on any of the Prehistory Guys shows before, big, huge welcome to you, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the little bell to get your notifications when we go live or when we post a new post, and hit the like button as well. You've no idea how actually it seems like a little thing, the hitting the subscribe and the like button, but it has a massive effect if enough people do it. Makes people. It doesn't, not only swells our numbers, but the YouTube algorithm perks up and takes notice, which helps our videos get a wider audience. So
it does. I've just spotted Juliet. Hi from France. Where are you, Juliet? Have I asked you before?
Juliet BH. I don't know. Very likely. Wildflower. Oh, hello again from Germany. Excellent. Return Viewers Guide. We know who you are. Riss. Hi, Joe. Off to the bar. All right. Anything we said? And David Potter. Hello. He's the man. Lazzy, Matt.
Hello, David. Yeah. And I noticed Chris is here as well. Yeah.
Juliet is in Vendôme.
Oh, are you? Okay.
Yeah.
I went there a lot.
Vendôme, all over the world. And there's Lynn Bailey from Banbury, just 17 miles down the road. Where I used to go to school.
Cataphonia also from France. Where are you in France, Cataphonia 65?
Oh, dear. Hi, Candide. Yay. Oh, Rich DJ, nice to see you. 42 likes already. My goodness. Hey. I tell you what, we could waffle forever and a day. Yeah, just before we go on, just a little appeal as well. We depend entirely on subscriptions from our dear friends at Patreon. So please do consider joining them. Help this show and all the other content go on. There's loads of stuff on offer on our Patreon page. Ad-free versions of all the stuff that's on YouTube. Special podcasts that you won't get anywhere else. Yay.
And your own live broadcasts as well, things like that. Yes,
that is very true. I'll on the recorded version of this, I'll put the link up there, but there's always a link down the bottom there, or at least there should be. Anyway, anything else to say before we get on with?
Only Cataphonia 65 is closer to Spain than me.
So, part 2 of Standing with Stones watch party. Where did we leave you at the end of the last show then, Rupert?
Well, we were just driving out of Dorset, weren't we?
Dartmoor.
Did we stop on Dartmoor? Yeah. You know what?
Wow.
What's the last scene in the first section then?
It's you sort of walking over Dartmoor and looking at stuff, and then the car drives down that road, and we leave Dartmoor. Okay.
Wow, so Knowlton's in this one.
Yes. Sure. Wow. I think we better start and not dwell on your memory.
Let's go. Yeah, I know.
Too long. Everybody ready? Let's go with part 2. Moving on into into southern England. There we go.
It's crazy. You go from falling over stones round every bend to really having to hunt them out. It seems strange that moving east through England, you find less and less sites, but actually it says a lot about our ancestors through the ages. When communities are successful, settlements continue to develop. People only move to new pastures when the land stops providing, and in the West Country, that's exactly what happened. Even today, there's very little building because the land just isn't hospitable. Fortunately for us, though, it means that our ancestors' hard work is still there to see. When you look at the development of societies in other countries, it's clear from places like the Great Pyramids or the Acropolis that the cities have continued to develop without enormous cultural movement. Most other cities in the world have grown through either knocking down or building over the ancient structures. In places where those ancient monuments are still there to be seen, they've lost their original meaning, but somehow they've kept a level of importance for the people. Of course, that could just be a question of wonder. You have to ask, would the Great Pyramids still be there if they'd only been 30 feet tall?
That man's a genius.
True thing, though, isn't
Sometimes, like Nine Stones in Dorset, our ancient monuments stand neglected by the roadside, virtually unnoticed by passing motorists and unvisited by all but the enthusiast.
I am trying. Somebody requested closed captions, and I am attempting to simultaneously turn them on if I look a bit distracted. Except that I just have to stop there. You see that? You see the spare wheel on the back there? For some reason, we were driving round, and it was advertising a garage in Stratford.
Yeah, it was.
That spare wheel, the 5 spokes you see on there, is actually CGI'd onto the back of the Land Rover.
What are you like? That was genius.
What am I like? Yes.
Yeah.
There's a little snippet you can take away and dine out on.
The passing centuries have left many ancient sites with a mysterious anonymity. We respect them, but we don't understand them, and their social importance has long since disappeared. We protect them and ignore them in equal measure. Stonehenge is a perfect example. This Bronze Age site is part of an enormous settlement that sprawls across the surrounding countryside. It's hard to see a lot of it now, but this raised mound originally rose an astonishing 17 feet out of the ditch around it. The careful placing of this Norman church would have been a very powerful way of putting an end to any earlier non-Christian goings-on. Now, its crumbling ruin sits like a weary trespasser on unguarded land.
Another genius piece of writing for you. Do you want to say anything about Knowlton? Because we sort of glossed over it, but it's another one of those sites that in the years gone by, and certainly in the last few years, we've learnt.
It's such an important site.
Yeah,
and I mean it's actually all that remains of 3 henges in the group.
Yeah,
and. I don't know if you picked up on that the ditch was originally 17 feet deep.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but you have to see it to believe it, don't you?
It's it is how deep is an Olympic-sized swimming pool? It's about 10 feet. About 10 feet deep, so it's okay. It's not quite twice as deep as that, but that gives you a sense of if you ever stand on the edge and look straight down. Yeah. It's such a vast undertaking, and although it's not as big by any means as the mega henges nearby, like Dorchester, Mount Pleasant in Dorchester and Mornbury Rings.
Yeah.
It's still, it's vast. Clearly, it was a very important region because there are a lot of very big henges, or there were a lot of very big henges, all in a relatively small region.
Well, talking of which, of course, we're going to be interviewing Sue Greeny very soon, who's
we are looking forward to that
about Mount Pleasant, which is not that far away from here. Nasty Nate, you are a superstar. Thank you so much. That really is appreciated. Thank you. There's nothing much more to say about that, except we could have stayed at Knowlton Henge for a long time. There are so many places in Standing with Stones that we could have stayed at for a very long time. So shall I move on?
I was just going to comment that Matt's just said it's pretty big for the size of the henge. It sounds it. I'm not absolutely sure, to be honest, because they haven't done excavations at enough henges to make that to be absolutely certain about that. There's certainly been a few of the smaller henges that the ditches were about 15 feet deep. So maybe, but equally maybe not. I think it depends. As Brian said, that plus a 17-foot mound. Well, we don't know exactly how big the bank would have been. I suspect not quite as high as that, or because of the rake on it. But it could have been. It could have been. But equally, yes, it's you can imagine it would have been an extraordinarily impressive sight at any of the big henges to have that massive bank and then the ditch inside the berm. Huge.
Chris Davis says my son is an amazing napper. Is he a fan of James Dilley? Because you'd be interested to know we interviewed James Dilley, star Flint napper and prehistoric reenactor and experimental archaeologist just this afternoon. So that'll be coming out. And who else? A Yorkshireman in Dorset said you should have lingered longer at Nine Stones too. Yeah, we should have lingered.
The thing is that there's so many places we wanted to linger longer, but the film would have been a week long.
Well, perhaps we'll go back and make that version.
we get so many messages from people saying, "I was really disappointed you didn't stop at this place." It's like if you knew how big the list was at the beginning, that we were just weeping at some. No, we can't put that one in as well.
Yeah. Despite the network complaints we know we'll get. I shall resume.
Yes, resume.
Getting that very late in the evening. Yes, the Long Man of Wilmington. Of course, part of the last sequence was the giant. Sorry, I've forgotten his name.
Carnabas or Cernabas, which is
Cernabas giant. Thank you very much indeed for the save there. No, the reason I mention, because we included those in because it was rude not to, but we kind of are not implying that we know that they belong in prehistory, even though they're there. You see what I mean?
And one of and one of them, Mike Allen, the man who dates ditches and the like. Yeah. That's doing him down. He's a phenomenal soil and snail expert and the like. Mike was one of the team. In fact, he was probably one of the key people on the team who dated. Was it Cernabas? It was Cernabas that they did this year, wasn't it? Yeah. Last year. And that's been dated to, where did they place that in the late, wasn't it? It was Middle Ages?
Yeah.
Something
like that. But, the chalk, we did include the chalk figures. So, just putting that rider on. I shall get back to business.
This is the chestnuts in Addington, Kent.
I look so
young.
And
I wish I had one of these in my garden.
Yeah, me too.
It's the remains of a Neolithic long barrow that was used well into the Bronze Age, and there are other sites like this in the southeast. Not far from here, the remains of another long barrow called Cauldron looks out across the open hills and moors which haven't changed much for thousands of years. But in and around towns that have been changing constantly for hundreds of years, the land has been progressively divided into smaller and smaller plots, so structures were pulled down as their relevance in society faded, no longer showing the way so much as simply in the way.
Thankfully not here, though.
Yeah, it's another example of us using a site to make a point, a general point, rather than talk about the actual site itself. Because, again, we're with the Medway tombs here, the Medway megaliths. We've looked at chestnuts and cauldron there. There is also the Addington Long Barrow, Kit's Coty, Whitehorse Stone. And all these things need looking at very, very carefully, and particularly cauldron, which we sort of glossed over there, which is a massive long barrow. And we didn't see in the film there the curbstones around it. The curbstones are so big that once it was thought it was a stone circle, not a tomb. But significant about cauldron is that the dates returned by the bones there give it potentially the earliest Neolithic remains in the British Isles.
Yeah. 49 it's dated to, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
3
BC. Oh,
yeah. Around about 3. But that is contemporary with goings on.
3950. Yeah. I'm
with goings on in Brittany, and of course the adjacents to Brittany in the Channel, etc. And it's not far from the exit from the Folkestone Channel Tunnel thing there as well. Down there. But these are sort of details that got missed in Standing with Stones, and so many places that we used to make a general point. I just thought I'd say
Neolithic Chick has just said, because she was doing a tour of the Medway Tombs last year, and chestnuts, so close to the chestnuts, I'm not able to view them. Yes. It's different owners, isn't it? It's different owners since we made the film, and because the woman who used to live there didn't mind people coming to visit at all.
For a small fee, but
it's a bit mean to close it to the public, I have to say.
Yeah. But, it is a private garden, fair enough.
Yeah, but why buy it? Why buy it if you don't want people to come and visit it? I just think it's wrong.
Yeah, well, there is, we could have a conversation about my own Neolithic long barrow. Nobody else is going to get.
Yeah, true, but I still think it's mean.
Oh, okay. Never mind. It is sad, but we're very lucky to have been able to get in to see them. Yeah. Emily Parker says she likes your haircut. Then or now?
You mean my haircut then? Yes, my haircut then. That was my very dear friend who crops up in the chat every now and again, Binky Beaver, Alison. She's been cutting my hair for a very, very, very long time. She was responsible for that. You can tell that this is lockdown for you.
Excuses. I'm going to press the button.
It's easy to see how history covers its tracks, especially in cities. The constant redevelopment can leave few signs of buildings from decades ago, let alone hundreds or thousands of years. So you may well wonder what on earth we're doing in the middle of London, and what there could possibly be to see here.
You'd be right. Absolutely nothing. Yeah, almost nothing. There is something here, unnoticed by passers-by, and all trace of its importance long forgotten. In here is the London Stone. Truth is, we don't know its origin, but we do know that it's been here for a long time, and it's actually part of a much bigger stone that was broken here in the 18th century. We also know that it's been moved back and forth across the road in the last few hundred years, but a few possible clues remain in folklore. There are stories that say that it was once part of a stone circle on this site. Others say that it was the pillar, or the top of a pillar, in Brutus's palace. It's also reputedly the stone to which all measurements were made to London. So if you see a milestone that says London 27 miles, it's to here.
Just a quick update on the London Stone. It's had a brief sojourn elsewhere. The area has been a little bit redeveloped, and it's been on display in the London Museum just down the road for a few years. But now, I'm glad to say, it's back in its hole in the wall.
Quite right too.
Pardon?
Quite right too.
Well, yes, but it's got a brand new hole in the wall. Do you want to see what it looks like?
Yeah, go
on. Google Street View. That's Cannon Street now. Yes, up and down. And do you see across the road there? See?
Oh, that's a nice hole in the wall.
That's right. Brand new building, because it was a rundown sports shop then. But yeah, it's in that behind glass. Yeah. Anyway, there you go. I thought that would be nice to show you.
Just catching up with a couple of chats here. Yeah, Chris Davis says that he found us because he has DNA sample matches to someone they found in Orkney.
Wow.
That's very cool. That is very cool. Matt, some of the archaeology in London is dozens of feet down. That is so true. It is amazing how many place names relate to things that are now well below surface level. Underground rivers that you don't know anything about. And I can't remember the names of the rivers, actually. But it's extraordinary what is genuinely under our feet all the time.
It seems to be, it's undermining, what you started with this section saying, stuff, how much stuff is, where cities have grown up and will probably never be able to retrieve so much stuff. Shall I hit play again?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Here we go.
There are thousands upon thousands of prehistoric sites around Britain. And if you just count stone circles, nothing else, just stone circles, there's nearly 1,000 of them. It's incredible that out of all those sites, most people only seem to know this one.
I have to say, do you remember filming that, Rupert?
I will never forget filming that.
Well, because I don't know which take that was, but we got it right the first time. I was sitting next to Rupert.
That can't be possible, yeah.
Yeah, I was full of bright ideas. Why don't you be driving along and we'll just see Stonehenge appear out of your window just as you finish the sentence? How likely was that to happen? Got it bang on.
So we drove away from it as I was just reciting script, driving away so we could time. Okay, so coming back the other way, where do I have to start speaking for it to be visible in shot?
Yeah.
There, and fully expected that we would be spending 3 hours
just count stone circles,
doing this,
nothing else.
Just driving backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
But we did. We got it on the first shot, and thought, No,
that can't
that's
be
not
right.
possible. No, come on. Let's do it again just in case. So we did it twice and got it right both times. And so I don't know. Is that first one or second one? I don't know.
I don't know. I can't remember. Anyway, a little sidebar there. Okay.
I'll tell you what, before you start again,
before
you start again, for anybody who hasn't seen the bloopers reel, that also worth pointing out that when we were leaving London, there's that little sequence with the bus there, and we were driving in the traffic, and we could hear police sirens in the distance, and then eventually saw these blue flashing lights. I could see the blue flashing lights in the mirror behind me. So I pulled over, just being a responsible driver. I pulled over to let the police car go past us, and the police car pulled in behind us, and it was us that they were chasing because they'd seen us pointing a camera out the window and thought we might have been terrorists.
It was the height. It was the height of the terrorist threat roundabout. Then, and it's not actually in the bloopers. It's in the unseen footage, which again is lurking.
Okay.
Yes, which is a less viewed thing, which is not necessarily funny stuff, but sort of interesting stuff that remained on the cutting room floor. How many takes did it take for that shot, David? No, one. Yes. Oh, I see. You saw. Okay, moving on.
It's incredible that out of all those sites, most people only seem to know this one.
Now, obviously, I'm not being dismissive of Stonehenge itself. Just the fact that when visitors come to marvel at the imposing monoliths, they miss the scale and significance of the entire complex. There are literally hundreds of prehistoric sites spreading for miles in all directions. Earthworks, long barrows, avenues of stones, burial sites, and the massive cursus, they all show that this was a huge, thriving community. Woodhenge, a couple of miles northeast, is the remains of a complex timber structure, probably an enclosed circular building which sat on its own raised mound, long since flattened by ploughing.
Not so sure about that. Maybe.
No, West Kennet Long Barrow to the north, at 350 feet long, is the largest chambered tomb in England and Wales. And a little further north again is Silbury Hill, the biggest man-made mound in Europe. It's estimated that to build this giant would have taken 500 men working every day for 10 years. The term henge originally came from Stonehenge. In Old English, it refers to the hanging stones or lintels, but it came to mean something quite different, and ironically, Stonehenge itself is not, strictly speaking, a henge. Henges have a ditch inside the raised bank, but at Stonehenge the ditch lies on the outside, which implies that they had quite different functions. The true henge of this vast Wiltshire complex is Avebury. Avebury is over 20 miles north of Stonehenge, a short day's walk for our ancestors, and it is without doubt the grandest ceremonial site in Britain. Today its splendour is really only visible from the air, but when it was built it must have been a breathtaking sight. When Avebury was excavated in the early part of the 20th century, the surrounding ditch was found to have been sheer-sided and 30 feet deep. On the outside of the ditch was a wide, flat terrace running at the foot of the bank which towered 20 feet above the central earthwork. Our ancestors excavated 150,000 tons of chalk rubble to create the ditch, an immense undertaking for something clearly of immense importance.
I've paused it there. So,
do you want to backpedal to... Yeah, go on.
No, I'm pleased with that little bit of CGI.
Well, your CGI. I think you did a sterling job.
Yeah, because even standing there today, it sort of takes your breath away with the depth that it is at now. But looking at that, you just... Well, it doesn't
and the truth is that even
sense.
looking at this, you still don't get the scale of the site as a whole, do you? It's because it's just because of the spread of the place that the stones don't look that huge until you're actually there. Yeah. But 30 feet deep, that ditch. Yeah. It's just bonkers. I wanted to pick up on just briefly, Paul and Rebecca said, what are we not sure about Woodhenge, or is that a question for another day? Well, briefly, it's because looking at a number of the other timber structures that we know about, so sites with consecutive rings of posts, that the fact, this was always considered to be a roofed building, but there's no evidence to that. It was just an assumption.
Well, it's the configuration of the timber posts. You've got a ring of thicker posts, which could be interpreted as the central post to support the central, the highest bit. So you'd have an open area in the inside.
So we're not saying we think it's completely wrong. We're saying we're not sure about that now, having looked at a number of other sites with concentric rings of timber posts. Because the principal problem with any of these imagined reconstructions, put it that way, is that even though the posts are very wide in diameter, that the implication, it's always been assumed that if you've got a post that is sunk very deeply into the ground, that you can calculate how tall it may have been, and that's generally speaking true, especially with the stones themselves. We know that if the pit was, basically you've got a quarter to a third in the ground as well. Now, the thing is, there's all sorts of reasons with timber posts. There's a lot of reasons why you might want to sink something quite deeply into the ground, but not necessarily have it so tall sticking out of the ground. And that can be a lot to do with, what sort of load bearing are they supposed to be doing? It might not be the height. It might be to do with how much weight they're actually supposed to distribute. So we have a few ideas about how they may have been used, and this is a possibility, but it is by no means a certainty.
Andy Baker said too many people at Avebury these days. Actually, it's I think pre-COVID there were, but I saw a report, that now's a good time to go because there aren't so many people. Also, I tell you what, I can recommend going there at 6 o'clock in the morning because there's nobody sort of manning the barriers or anything like that. You can turn up at very early in the morning, and we were alone there, 2 years ago when we were making the welcome video. We arrived 6 o'clock there.
We were alone then?
We were alone then, and it was just gorgeous.
It did quite rapidly fill up, though, didn't it? Closer to lunchtime.
But timing is everything at Avebury.
Yes.
But it's not so bad. It's what do you do? It's got a pub in the middle of it. So
yes. And so a Yorkshireman in Dorset, I'm just going to say, I never begrudge a parking fee because they do so much work looking after these places that.
Sure. That's new, though. I wasn't there so long ago. The parking fee.
What,
for
Silbury? No, it wasn't. No.
Anyway, shall we motor along? It's done with Avebury.
Undertaking for something clearly of immense importance, and it wasn't the only one in the region. 50 miles to the west in Somerset stands the Deceptive stone circle of Stanton Drew.
Here we go.
It looks pretty boring, doesn't it? An enormous stone circle with a smaller outer one at each end. But its bland appearance on the landscape gives no clue as to its original scale and importance. This circle is over 100 metres across. Now, in diameter, that makes it second only to the vastness of Avebury. Some years ago, the Ancient Monuments Laboratory of English Heritage carried out a magnetometer survey across the whole site, and what they discovered is breathtaking. Inside the circle were 9 concentric rings of wooden posts.
Thank you, Jeff.
Each post a metre apart, and each post a metre or more across. Now, you don't use a post a metre or more across unless you need it to be tall. And on top of that, the whole site was surrounded by a ditch and a raised bank. It may have been wood, but this would have been every bit as impressive as the stone circles of Stonehenge and Avebury.
But perhaps there is a reason for the posts not to have been so tall. The design of a henge implies that the banks were for spectators. The inner terrace at Avebury adds weight to this idea, suggesting a level walkway for finding your place before climbing the bank, exactly as we still do at arenas today. There would be no sense in having posts so tall that they obscured the spectator's view, and they need only be the height of a man for the audience to see the whole spectacle from their raised position on the massive bank. So why create an artificial forest where spectators could see, but participants could not? For me, the most likely answer is blood sports. And shocking as that may sound to many, it's important to remember that this was a time when most of Britain was covered in forest, and the most skilled hunter would probably have been held in high esteem, possibly even beyond his own community. The deep ditch would stop animals escaping into the crowd, while the forest of posts would create an enclosed but nevertheless real hunting ground. And then again, this amount of huge posts could easily have supported a floor, exactly the same design concept as at the great Colosseum of Rome, but preceding it by thousands of years. We can only wonder.
Well, shall we go into another room while everybody discusses that?
There's a few things to pick up on.
Yeah.
There, how much or little of the ditch has been excavated? Ty asked.
There's been
Enough to know the
depth.
depth. Enough to know the depth, but no. I mean, you can imagine the scale of that as an excavation. It would just cost so much money.
Yeah.
But so they know the actual depth. But
there's been no excavation done at all. At Stanton Drew.
Sorry, but no, I think Ty was talking about Avebury.
I'm so sorry. I do crossed wires there. Sorry.
If I've misunderstood, then I'll apologise. We know that Avebury ditch has been excavated to ascertain the depths, but Stanton Drew, no, they've just done the magnetometry survey. And is it possible to say if the wood structures were load bearing? It's not. No, it's not.
Because it has to be emphasised that all we're working off here is the magnetometry.
Yes.
But the magnetometry is enough to tell us that there's a bank and ditch and the size of those post holes. So everything you see is an extrapolation of that, whether the posts were tall, as I illustrated in the CGI, or whether they were short. At the moment, we don't know. And to a large degree, despite its extraordinary nature, Stanton Drew, again, remains one of those sites that is under-investigated in our humble view. I think we'd stand by, the conjecture that we, put forward there. Would we make it more nuanced, perhaps, now if we were remaking it?
I don't know what you mean by nuanced in these terms. I don't think. I don't. It's funny. I mean, Twyhiker has said that they found our views on this quite fanciful. That's fair enough. You don't have to agree on these. We are having looked at now thousands of sites, not just in Britain, but around the world. We are increasingly, can't be certain, but increasingly confident that these big sites are entirely to do with not wildlife, are to do with animal husbandry, and so whether they were we said blood sports here. Now, one of the reasons that I will back that up in this context is that everything comes from something. And now, when we made this, I have to say that I was utterly unaware of the Roman Venati. I didn't know anything about them at all. And it was only much later research where these cropped up. And the Roman Venati, they were part of the Roman Games. And they would, in the arenas, they would import animals, wild animals from Africa, from all over the place. And they would do the most disgusting things with them in the arenas. They would dispatch in the course of a games, which could be a week, say, tens of thousands of animals would be killed, and they would do things like they would bring a lion from Africa and bears from Northern Europe, and they'd put them in the arena together. Now, they would also have men pitted against the wild animals. They would have slaves or criminals thrown to the wild animals. They would even have Christians thrown to the wild animals. And what makes this so compelling is that the way they arranged the arenas to do the Venati was they would separate the main play area, for want of a much better expression, and they would use a ditch bank system to protect the audience, so the animals couldn't get to the audience. And they would also, within the arena, they would put bushes and trees and things like that to make it look more like people hunting in a forest. Now, that must have come from somewhere. So when we found out about this, which was, I don't know, when did I first hear about that? 5 years ago, maybe. If I had known about that before, then I would have been probably a lot more confident about saying that Stanton Drew was possibly about blood sports. But
yes, and in the first place, it wasn't exactly plucked out of nowhere. Do you know the main inspiration? What I've drawn, what it came from, was reading Mike Pitt's book Henge World.
Yeah.
Which opens, strangely enough, with an account of the first geophys survey of Stanton Drew. So that was, that blew my mind. I thought, that's one of the main things we've got to do with Standing with Stones is have people have a look at Stanton Drew and what's going on there. But secondly, in the excavations and the archaeology of Durrington Walls, the evidence there is, although the pigs, and because we're talking about pig feasting and lots of pork roasted at certain times of year, big festivals, big goings on, but the pigs themselves seem to have been dispatched at close range with bow and arrow. Not by a simple slaughtering means, and which puts a hugely different spin on how you're treating animals in this kind of environment. Moreover, within Durrington Walls, you've got an analog, or something very similar in terms of timber circles, just like that. And it just struck me. I wonder, pigs being woodland animals, that in order to keep them within the henge area, or to keep them ordered, that those timber erections weren't actually false forests to make the pigs feel at home, just somewhere for them where they could be managed easily.
Animals can't stampede when there's that much stuff in the way. That's another aspect. But
it was I'm just saying it was those elements that the sort of little eye openers like that, the actual evidence for animals being killed, as if they were being hunted in a domestic situation. If you call inside Durrington Walls a domestic situation. And that was it. Combined with the fact of being very close to the creation of the CGI for Stanton Drew, and having stood on the, once you stand on those banks at Avebury, there's not much in your brain can stop you from thinking it's an arena. People came here to watch something. What would be so compelling, some kind of sport. Those elements thrown together. I'm sorry, Rupert, you wanted to say something.
No, that's all right. I'm just picking up a couple of comments. I'm sorry, folks, not being able to answer all of you. It's great that you're writing so much. But Wildflower says, well, it makes no sense to have so big timbers that the stones look small. Do you know, it's such a good point. You do need to factor in that we don't actually know, because so little has been done, well, nothing has been done in terms of excavations. So the stone circle itself could have been put there 1,000 years before the timber posts were put in place. We just don't know. But if they were reasonably close to concurrent, you're absolutely right. You wouldn't have gone to all the trouble of putting up a stone circle and then put up timbers that were so tall. They just make the stones look silly.
Well, except that presupposes that the stone circle is there for only aesthetic reasons in the first place.
That is true too.
I doubt that very much.
We have the
what's
missing
available to you to make a stone circle, whatever practical use that may have. And as ever we say with stone circles, where are the horizontals that make sense of it? Fencing between, the stones. The thing about stone is it stays. It's there. Wood rots and can be replaced, but the stone is a permanent element and is not necessarily an aesthetic thing, but a practical thing. That's it. Anything else in the chat there that?
Well, there's so much, but we'll just we'll be here until tomorrow.
Well, I'm sure this is a chat that can go on in the comments, or we can air again. I'll tell you what, we'll be talking about it probably on the Patreon page, having a right good discussion with. I know some of you are patrons, but if you want to join them, come over to the Patreon page. Sign up and take part over there. Shall I move on now? Yay? Is that fair?
Yeah, go on then. Yeah, because we will be there. I could spend 10 minutes replying to all of these. So
I know, Okay. Anyway, thanks, but thanks for all your comments and
Extraordinary variety of sites in the region, many of them of such immense size. I think this whole area of Wiltshire through Somerset must have been the capital of prehistoric Britain. And there's another important aspect of these chalk lands.
What are you saying?
That's that where there's chalk.
I'm saying it must have been the capital of Neolithic Britain. I say there are some people who might beg to differ with that as well, post.
That's true.
Ness of Brodgar and all that, but that's a discussion for another day as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll still stand by that though.
There's Flint, the very basis of prehistoric currency. Imagine a land where the slag heaps you create, your building rubble, is full of money. With the raw materials for axe making under their feet, the people of Wiltshire would have had enormous wealth. There was a huge cultural shift in the Bronze Age. The increase in farming and settlement building meant that for the first time, people had to defend their territory, and so the warrior culture was born, and with it, the use of horses. Now, when the Uffington White Horse was excavated in the early 1980s, both it and the hill fort alongside were both dated to the late Bronze Age. Now, you only need to look at the Spanish conquistadors' decimation of South America to see what a few warriors on horseback can do. These really were rich and powerful people.
So I guess there's a few issues in there that we might be taken to task with, as far as, I don't know, first time people, they needed to defend places. Well, that's not true, because we know now that battles did take place in the Neolithic and in the early Neolithic. Come to that in Britain, Crickley Hill being one place. But I think it's a really great talking point. That obviously combined with the fact that, if, as we're told by Mike Allen and his snails now, that not only are we talking about a place that's wealthy, but a place that is peculiar in that it wasn't that wooded. This area where we've got all the henge building, Stonehenge, Wiltshire, down to Dorset, etc., and across to the east a little bit, was surprisingly not bare, but not as wooded as we think. It was quite open, which would have made it a very different prospect for Neolithic farmers and settlers.
Absolutely. It turns out that in a lot of places, and Mike's research has been very much based in the south of England for this, but so he can't say for certain whether this is the same across the whole of Britain. But certainly it shows that in Wiltshire, where we had always presumed that they deforested in order to build these sites, they didn't. They built the sites where it was already easy to build them. They didn't have to.
They weren't silly.
Nigel
asks, how long did it take to get those two horses in position? Well, they were just there. I kid you not.
There.
There. And and while they remained there, we stopped the camper van. I got on the roof of the camper van, put the tripod up on the top of the camper van, and got that shot with the long lens.
We were quite lucky with things like that, weren't we?
That also is in the unseen footage. If you, if you want to seek it out.
I just want to pick up a couple of things in the chat here. Henry Hay says 1 meter diameter post is a pretty large tree. Which species? How old? How long would the wood last before it rotted? Any evidence for the posts being replaced? So they were oak. They were pretty much always oak. It was the default timber for all these structures. How long would the wood last before it rotted? Do you know what? This is a huge subject that so much debate goes on around this, not just because of the timber circles, but of palisaded enclosures and all sorts. That there is a big argument where a number of people think, in fact, it's a whole school of thought within archaeology, about the ritual burning of buildings or the ritual burning of sites when they're decommissioned and you burn them down. But the thing is that a lot of timber is treated by fire. So you burn the bottom of a post so that when you put it in the ground, it doesn't rot. It seals the end. And so the argument is there's an awful lot of people, and I have to say, me included, who believe that this isn't an illustration of burning. It's the fact that you have got any kind of burnt wood remains in a pit, in a slot, is because the post was treated with fire before it was put in the ground. So how long before it rotted? Well, there have been tests at palisaded enclosures, so same will apply, or some of the timber cursus monuments in Scotland. And there is evidence that posts were replaced, and they weren't replaced in any kind of uniformity. It's like, this one, the 10th one down on this side was replaced, for example. I'm having a senior moment. I was just going to make one other point, and I can't think what the hell it was. Well, that probably answers the question anyway.
Well, I'll come in there. It's an interesting thing. The film is called Standing with Stones. And the only reason, of course, that we can't include the vast majority of monuments that are out there, that walking with wood would not have been quite so aesthetically pleasing because we can't see any of it nowadays.
No.
But
No.
you make a really good point that,
Nor with
palisaded
dawdling with
enclosures,
ditches or...
yeah, and all those kinds of things, those practical things made out of wood we can't see. Very, very few timber circles have been discovered. And usually because you've got to be looking in a certain place. Latterly, of course, we're getting all this aerial footage and drone footage that is showing stuff up in fields. So we're beginning to really get a sense of how, I don't know, densely populated with wooden buildings these islands were. Chris asks, he says, Chris Davis asks, I have a rookie question. Did these people really have domesticated animals? Yes, they did. And in fact, at this particular period, I was talking about Donington Walls a moment ago, there was a huge differential between what was going on the continent and what had been going on in Britain. In Britain, from being a more agrarian-based economy, it had moved back towards being more meat and pastoral-based, strangely enough. And it's only when the beginning of the Bronze Age, end of the Neolithic, beginning of the Bronze, when the beakers come in from abroad, that it gets back to a more agrarian way of life. That's it in a nutshell. My understanding in a nutshell, yeah.
I need to pick up on a few things here.
Yes.
Hoping that we're not going to stay here all night. Actually, the other point that I was having a senior moment about that I was going to say was...
Sorry, I'm laughing at Matt E.
Okay,
Sorry,
troublemaker.
Carry on.
One of Henry's questions there was about how long would the wood last before it rotted. Yeah. And just making the illustration that you take your average picket fence. We like our picket fences. They last quite a long time, and that's just a skinny piece of wood that could rot very easily. Now, on my field, I have some wooden posts just marking out, little enclosed areas and things. And I've got some timber posts out there that were put in the ground, and they're only ordinary fence posts, sort of so big. And they were put in the ground in the 1970s. I know this to be true. So here we are, 50 years later, and those posts are still standing. So something a meter in diameter, pretty sure that it lasted, a pretty long time, generations. Cornwall says, if so many animals were slaughtered, surely bone evidence left at the site. No. In the same way as, we've made the point before that, you kill a bull in a bull ring, well, that bull gets eaten, but they don't slaughter it there, don't they? Well, they slaughter it there. They don't butcher it there. That you'll have your, if it is games, that you'll do all your killing, but you'll take them off to butcher them somewhere else. So, no. In actual fact, that's probably one of the reasons why there seems to be so little
and there is
bone
some
evidence.
But
actually, do you know what? Devil's Quoits is a good example. Huge amount of cattle bones at the Devil's Quoits in Oxfordshire, so that's an interesting one.
But generally, I thought they would have kept the places pretty clean. Was that it, Rupert?
I think so.
We can't. All right. Let us. Where was I? Let's press the button. Ta-da.
As communities grew, inevitably rituals became progressively more elaborate, and burial grounds like Priddy Nine Barrows illustrate the huge significance they held for the community. Even today, the very word barrow still holds a ghostly place in folklore.
Appreciate it, Jim.
Like any graveyard, there's a sense of walking amongst the dead. Over time, the whole relationship between the living and the dead became more structured, giving rise to sophisticated temples in a variety of building styles. This part of England is characterised by the Seven Cotswold style of tomb, and some of them are wonderfully preserved.
He made me say
some, like Stony Littleton.
Oh, anybody recognise Stony Littleton from the very first shot at the beginning where Rupert comes out. That's where he comes out. And now you can see the ammonite in the portal stone there. Yeah. I'll carry on.
Burial chambers which are accessed from within a low central passageway. Excavations seem to suggest that the chambers in this style of tomb were specific to age and gender of the dead. Children buried in the first chamber on the left, sweeping clockwise with adult males in the end chamber, with the old being buried in the chamber closest to the entrance on the right. Wayland's smithy is a much grander construction with huge stones forming the imposing forecourt.
No, that's later on, Pick. The petrified wood is in Wales.
It was developed over a long period of time. The mound we still see today was actually built over an earlier mortuary house made of timber.
You know what? I'd like to make a special about Wayland's smithy. It's a fantastic site, with its original timber mortuary under this bank here, and the
You'd have to get back into CGI.
Have to get back into CGI. Well, yeah, let's bring it on. Why not? The funny thing is, you can't tell, but it's barely a few hundred yards. What is it? I don't know. It's less than. It's about a kilometre from the White Horse monument on that hillside along the Ridgeway. Yeah. I'll carry on. We could drift off into the long grass here. Yeah,
yeah, we could.
Others, like Bellasnapp in the Cotswolds, have external burials along the side walls, but with the same meticulous attention to design and location. They certainly pick beautiful places to lay their loved ones to rest.
Before we get on with the Rollright Stones, I have to mention that that hymn cost us about £2,500 this time, April last year, because somebody made a copyright claim on it. I hasten to say I did buy the rights to that particular track, but YouTube shut us down for monetization while the firm that said they owned that music just dug their heels in. I nearly said a rude word then. Eventually, I proved that it was a track that I owned because there's an anomalous harp pluck at a particular point. I won't go back and illustrate it, but I could say to them, "This is different from the track that you're claiming money for." So anyway, it still lost us a lot of money.
Yeah,
hey ho,
cost us that amount of money, and there is no reclamation on that. It's just tough.
Yeah, hey ho.
Did you know Blake's rousing Jerusalem might never have been written if it weren't for these, the Rollright Stones in Oxfordshire? It may come as a surprise to know that much of Blake's art and writing was inspired by the ideas of an 18th century clergyman and friend of Isaac Newton.
William Stukeley was secretary to the Society of Antiquaries when he visited this place, and apparently he had a life-changing experience. His visit brought him to believe that the sites were religious and ritual centres built in ancient times by the Druids. Stukely meticulously catalogued, described and illustrated so many of our ancient monuments, bringing them firmly to public attention, and it's fair to say that their mystical importance and place in our hearts is entirely due to him. His passion led him to adopt the grandiose title of Archdruid Kindernax, ultimately inspiring the eccentric artist and poet William Blake to write his famous hymn. Jerusalem is actually about rekindling Druid culture in Britain.
This place is a wonderful concoction of historical confusion. There's names and dates all over the place. There's tales of witchcraft and kingly fighting, and no sense to be made of any of it. It is a complicated site. On the other side of the road from the circle, there's a big outlier called the King's Stone, and on the other side of the field over there is a very forlorn-looking dolmen called the Whispering Knights. The name Rollrights originates from Viking times, when it was called Hrolla Landrit, which meant the land with special rights belonging to Hrolla. And apart from being a landowner, we don't really know anything about him. And then it was thought to refer to a Norman called Roland, who fought a battle here. Except that the battle near here happened in 916 AD, and Roland died in 778.
Then, perhaps the most tenacious myth of all, there's the story of Danish King Rollo. You see, the land on which the stones stand was actually owned by a witch, and one day, while passing through, Rollo and his trusty knights found themselves confronted by the crone. She said to King Rollo, "7 long strides shalt thou take. If long Compton thou canst see, King of England thou shalt be." "Stick, stock, stone," said Rollo, "as King of England I shall be known." And he took his 7 strides, but the view was hidden by the slight rise of the ground. The witch screeched with laughter, "As long Compton thou canst not see, King of England thou shalt not be. Rise up, stick, and stand still, stone, for King of England thou shalt be none. Thou and thy men hoar stones shall be, and I myself an elden tree."
Which all sounds very mean and self-destructive to me. Ironically, if Rollo's legs had been a bit longer, then his strides may well have shown him the village of Long Compton in the valley below. Instead, he and his men turn to stone and remain as we see them today. Although people do say that some nights they uproot themselves and go down to drink in the stream in the valley below.
I'm convinced.
So what do we know? Aside from the tales of witchcraft, which persist to this day, it's generally accepted that the stones were erected about 5,000 years ago, and excavations here have uncovered Bronze Age burials, cremations, a couple of flint tools and an urn.
But perhaps most significant of all is its location. Sitting on the Cotswold Ridgeway, the Rollrights were probably, for thousands of years, a really important place on what could be the oldest trade route in the country. Trading in flint tools, pottery, livestock, textiles was probably very well established, and this was probably a major link between southern England and the whole of the rest of Britain.
There we are. That last sentence, Rupert, was a masterclass in how many times you could get the word probably into a sentence.
Do you know, I still wince. I still wince at that. And I don't know. I hate repetition and stuff like that. And I don't know how. There are certain times where I must have been writing late at night or something, and were we in a rush to? I can't remember.
Oh no, it wasn't that. It was an accident that you put in the 2 probablys, but because that road is quite busy, and we'd already done 2 takes, I think I said, "Sod it, we'll go." Go with that one because the traffic was stopping us. Anyway, that is the end of the second part of Standing with Stones. Next time we'll be going into Wales.
We will.
But for the meantime, is there anything that we need to address, questions and stuff? Also, we made a subsequent, 2 years ago now, we made a special film about the Rollright Stones, which you'll find.
Is it 2 years already? Wow, I suppose it must
at least. Be, yeah. I think so.
You're right. It was 2019.
That's right. Yeah. In which we made the point, about how little is actually known about such places as the Rollrights. And, we thought, let's make a film about the Rollright Stones because it's not far from where I live here. It's just down, half an hour down the road. And so what can we say about Rollright Stones? And we thought, nothing, really. And I thought, how can we make a film about it then? Let's make a film about how little we know about the Rollright Stones, and that's how it sort of got.
That is how it turned out.
Got made.
But it's interesting though that even doing it the other way around, it's still very informative about its place in history. Everything else.
Exactly.
It is interesting.
What people have been saying about it, despite the lack of absolute knowledge.
I want to pick up on a couple that slipped by that are just fun questions, really. Eric said, have you ever disagreed on how to interpret a site? You still disagree, or have you come to a mutual conclusion? And
if
which
I could
site?
find it, I would put it on the scene, on the screen, but it's going back a bit, isn't it?
Actually, I think 99 times out of 100, we tend to have pretty matching views on things, don't we? Really, I can't think of anything that we've disagreed about at all, really.
Well, that was peculiar. If we go back to the blood sports things, we had the ideas separately, but almost simultaneously.
Yeah, we actually, because we were talking on the phone, regularly. Obviously, this is in between things. And I can't remember whether it was you rang me or I rang you.
I rang you because I was working on the CGI, and it sort of come to me in a blinding flash.
And we almost simultaneously said it's blood sports. That was quite bizarre.
Weird.
We did both, come to that realization, if we can be arrogant enough to say that. But no, the thing is that because, in fact, somebody, forgive me, I don't remember your name, comment earlier on, but somebody said all archaeology is guesswork on earlier guesswork, which, to be fair, is a bit harsh. Yeah. It's an interpretive exercise, and often it is interpretation based on previous supposition. And that is why, and it's one of our biggest arguments against the archaeological fraternity, is that it's this thing about the sacred landscape and all these temples and what have you that are all, this whole thing comes because William Stukeley did the whole Druid thing. And the fact that you have Druids at Stonehenge at the solstice, that would not happen if it wasn't for Stukeley. It predates the Druids by thousands of years and has nothing to do with them whatsoever. Now, the thing that's changing so much in archaeology as we move forwards, and has very much been a growing situation in archaeology for years now, is that it's becoming more of a measurable science because of chemistry, basically, but chemistry and physics. The fact that we can now do a magnetometry survey across a site and say specifically what was there. We can do DNA analysis of bones. We can scrape the insides of pots. We're interviewing Harry Robson soon, who is a protein and enzyme expert. He scrapes the insides of pots and tells you what was in them. So there are so many things that have been happening over the last 20 years, probably, where in fact, C14 dating, that's going back to late 60s. So, it's gone beyond the realms of being just guesswork and blind interpretation. It is now very much based on measurable evidence that you then have to try to piece your jigsaw together on top of that. The interpretation obviously still remains, even now people talk about the sacred landscape, and we wince every time those words are spoken. But broadly, these are archaeologists working very, very hard to be as right as they possibly can with the evidence at their disposal.
It takes a long time to turn the tanker around. Even though there is new data, even though there is new stuff, because the tanker is slow moving and has a lot of weight to it. New stuff doesn't necessarily have an impact straight away, but it turns round in the end. We hope. But archaeology. It's a prehistoric archaeology. That's the thing. Archaeology generally, for a lot of it, you've got some history to, what's the word? The geometric word. You can do a 3-point. You can. There's in navigation when you've got 3 points, so you know where you are. Anyway, forget it.
Triangulation is the word.
Triangulation. That's right. You can triangulate. You are where you are.
I was just enjoying watching you struggle.
Thank you so much. But with prehistoric archaeology, one of those points has gone. So.
I'm sorry. Thanks, Poppy. That's quite made my evening. I'm just scrolling back through the comments. Poppy said, "Walking with wood could be misconstrued."
I spotted, yeah. I think Matt E said something along the same lines. Actually, I don't know.
Yes, he did.
Picked that off.
Yeah.
Made I laugh.
I missed that one. I want to pick up a Yorkshireman in Dorset. I wish I knew your name. He said, in the Derbyshire lead mines, I used to explore the oak timber posts, the oak timber supports, I beg your pardon, often rotted faster than the larch type woods. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I don't know what the biochemistry would be there. If you're talking about oak supports underground, does oak deal less well with those conditions? I mean, certainly out, above ground, oak was the go-to timber. So that's a very interesting point, actually. It would be really interesting to go over other excavations. Shut me up if I go off on one. But for example, one of the pieces of research that I've been reading recently for our big background project is the analysis of the. There are some very old Cursus monuments in Scotland, the oldest of all of them, that are palisaded. They became ditch and bank constructions, but originally they were palisaded, and what they've found at one where the preservation was unusually good, that there were the timber posts, the upright timber posts were spread quite wide, I think a couple of meters apart, something like that, and there was fencing, wooden fencing that went between them. Now, we have always said, in terms of interpreting any sites, we've said, but it's the missing horizontals. What else was there that has long gone? And here they found a palisaded cursus that had the remains of fencing. Now, I would be interested to go back to that, because I wasn't, to be honest, really caring what type of wood was being used there. But Yorkshireman and Dorset, you've made an interesting point there, and it might be relevant what the wood was used for the fencing. I will look into that. So many good comments here. So many good comments.
Yes. Yeah, we hear you, Cork. Yeah.
Yeah, Cork. You know what? Yeah, I'll buy you a drink one day.
Yeah, it is interesting, Sibylla. It's one of the great hunts for making sense of megalithic sites. Really, they appear so enigmatic on their own that I don't. It doesn't make sense to me that they existed as we see them on their own, simply as megalithic sites. Take someone like the Rollright Stones, which we've just been to. Doesn't make any sense just looking at a ring of stones. My guess is if we could reconstruct the missing timber, we'd see how it was used. We'd be able to see how people went to it, came from it, whether they had to pass through a ticket booth. All those I'm being facetious, but that kind
but you're not really, though, because it's quite possible. The fact that you get palisaded enclosures and causewayed enclosures where you've got a narrow gap on one side and a wide one on the other. Now, I've always interpreted that as again, if if it's on our theory of working with livestock, that you can drive everything through. You drive a whole herd through a wide gap, but you've got a really narrow one on the other side, so they're much more easy to control when you're actually getting them out. Or there's all sorts of ways you could reason with that. But if you're saying a ticket booth, you could get people in one by one, so they have to pay with their whatever their exchange would have been. But when you want to get rid of them all, then no, you can all go out the wide one. You're clear off. Sibylla asks if fencing has been found anywhere else. It must have been, Sibylla, but not to my knowledge yet. It's something that I was surprised to find that evidence, so I'm now looking for more. Haven't found any yet.
But we always get excited when we find that there's a new palisaded enclosure that nobody.
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
I mean,
it is exciting.
Nobody talks about the palisaded enclosure just down below West Kennet, down in the valley there, near to the road before you go up the other side up the avenue to Avebury. There's a massive palisaded enclosure down there, complex, timber posts. Nothing to see now, of course, but hugely significant in that environment down there, so near to Avebury and the sanctuary and the rest down there. Yeah. Sorry, I digressed.
I'll tell you something else that because a lot of that our whole theory about these sites being livestock or animal husbandry related, and us disagreeing so heavily with the temple notion, and so one of the issues has been that it's all very well us saying these weren't temples, these were this, that obviously there must have been temples, so what are we saying the temples were? And so it's been a really difficult line of research, actually, to look at, okay, where can you find a site that you can say with 100% certainty that this was genuinely a ritual or religious building? That's not easy. And because we have been grinding and grinding and grinding to find this evidence, because so much archaeological research, a paper is written and it's put on the shelf in a university and nobody knows anything about it, because it's only people like us that go digging for them and put them out in the public domain. And it is interesting, and very much what we were suspecting in the first place, that every single place we have found so far that you can categorically state is definitely religious or ritual, every single one of them that we have found so far is square or rectangular. None of them are round. And that might be, you might go, but for me, that is significant. There is a reason that you make something circular, and it might be so that things can't hide in the corners. But that's still an important. For me, it's an important aspect of what we're trying to dig up, anyway.
Well, I've got nothing more to add at this point that is springing to my mind.
Well, I'm just going to answer. Cherish there said which ones, not easy at all, and no, not easy at all, and the fact is that none of them are in Britain. None of them. They're in Eastern Europe or the Middle East, and the thing that we can't ever avoid is that the reason that it's not irrelevant when something has come from Eastern Europe is that we know that when the Beaker people came in, for example, Beaker people came from Eastern Europe or the steppes. They were coming over from Eurasia. Prior to that, other migrations into Britain, they've come from the east, and so it does follow that these practices, these traditions, would have been brought from the east. It's really been like pulling teeth, pulling these details together, but they are there. If you just keep plugging away, they are there.
Yeah. So watch this space. So enjoyed tonight, and so enjoyed your company, folks, and thank you so much for all your input, and hope you've had a jolly fine time.
Kronos, do you know what you see? There's another good comment there. I'm sorry. What's the time now? So we can stay. Kronos says, in Canada we have auction houses that have concentric circles, but there's seats around the circular pen around which you take animals you see. Yeah, very good.
I'm looking at modern day enclosures, and how modern day cattle farmers and ranchers, etc., what sort of enclosures they build in order to control people. And there are some really sophisticated, things where you're channeling cattle into this way and that, which have resonances with so many of the circular and odd-shaped timber structures sometimes are seen in the ground. But there's a long way. There's many a slip twixt cup and lip, as they say, between having the idea and actually proving it.
Yeah.
Is that it?
I'm sorry if we haven't been. I'm sorry if we haven't been able to answer all of you, folks. We would love to, but it's.
If you need, the best way of being in touch with us is being one of our Patreon supporters. So if you do have a burning desire to sort of have further conversations, check out the Patreon page.
Kevin, that's something else that I could talk about. The ends of curses. There's all different shapes for curses, and the topography is relevant, and it's it is it's animals.
And yes, it's the evidence from abroad of animal enclosure and animal control and how they did it in the far and near east, and that gives us a lot of the clues. Anyway, with that, as I say,
Noah Herbert says Laplanders herding their stock is awesome. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Circular enclosures. That's the point, isn't it? Yeah. I know. Down avenues as well. Oh, I know. Don't start me off. Exciting.
Yeah.
Stuff. No.
This is the stuff we've been doing. It's very exciting. Yeah. So we're off to Wales next time. So it'll be the same time next week, I think, unless something gets in the way. What we got in store? Tinkinswood, Druid Circle of Ulverston. We've got.
Love that place. Yeah.
Oh, isn't that fantastic? Yes. The modern, the rocking.
Pontypridd Rocking Stone.
Pontypridd Rocking Stone.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
we do. And we've got.
And of course, we get to Anglesey and the Brinkethley. That's, the cracker, isn't it? We'll have a fascinating conversation around that.
Yeah. What's the trippy place? I can't remember its name on Anglesey.
Lecky Trippeth. No. Oh no, sorry.
No, Trippy, not Lecky Trippeth. No,
that's Pembrokeshire, Lecky Trippeth. Sorry.
Yes, well done. No, the broth.
You've lost me. The trippy
trippy, man. Where they found the evidence for the stew.
Oh, Bachladiad.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bachladiad.
That's it.
Sorry for my Welsh pronunciation.
It's not. Well, thank you, BC. Yeah, absolutely. BC pronunciation would. Yeah. Oh,
yes.
Rich. And everybody can tell us how to pronounce it properly as well.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. And in fact, I hope that we have a Welsh person watching next week who can tell us how to pronounce Ysbyty Cynfyn. Because we tried to find a Welsh person to tell us and they didn't know. Even the woman that lived there didn't know. We said, is it Ysbyty Cynfyn? She said, might as well have been.
With that, we will say goodbye. And as I say, thanks for being with us. And thanks for playing nicely in the chat. You've been brilliant.
Yeah, thank you, folks.
We're so grateful.
Yeah, it's great to have such good comments as well. And you're good fun too. Thank you very much.
Till the next time then. Hope to see you then. Week. Many thanks, guys.
See ya.
Bye-bye. If I can find the finish end broadcast button, I'll hit it. There we go.
Bye.